Any feedback that you receive from the field should be assessed for its validity, and also so that you can determine whether it's actual correction or whether it's a reflection of the reviewer's preferences. These are your files. If you decide to accept the reviewer edits, such as our medical device client did with their Dutch translations, that's fine. You do whatever you think is best, but be sure that you do it based on factual information. Enlist the assistance of your translation provider to review the comments and see what they actually indicate before you decide what to do. If you've gone and hired a professional translation services provider and you're comfortable with their qualifications, and you're still not sure that you want to accept the translations that they've provided for you, well, then you certainly shouldn't be blindly accepting the input from your reviewers in the field. Find out what's really going on. And if you're not 100% confident, ask your translation services provider to tell you, are these changes preferential? Do they change the meaning? And do they legitimately improve the communication? That third bullet is really the rule of thumb for translation editors. When we have your documents translated and we go to the second step of our quality process and we have reviewers edit the translations, usually they're only making a change if they can legitimately improve the communication. If you do decide to go ahead and accept the input from your field reviewers, you should have your vendor update your files. This isn't something that you want to do on your own at the end of the project on the fly. You want the updates that you've accepted to be stored in your translation memory so that there's a record for your future projects. So again, make the decision whether or not to accept the reviewer feedback based on objective data that you're getting from your translation services vendor. Reviewers very often have motivations that have nothing to do with your goals. For example, if you're using a distributor, maybe sometimes that distributor has gotten paid to provide translations for you. Maybe they get paid by other clients, and now you've taken upon yourself to provide your own translations, and they're out of the loop, and they may be angry about that. We encounter reviewers who have a not invented here syndrome, where they don't believe that any translations that they haven't provided themselves or that haven't been provided by their local preferred vendor can't possibly be correct. We hear this all the time. How can a US company possibly provide French translations for Canada that are right? There's a host of other reasons why reviewers might not like your translations, and it's incumbent upon you to evaluate what's actually happening. Usually, there's some very strong personalities involved that can take up a lot of your time. You have to convince them that the quality process has been followed and that the translations are in fact correct. That's again why it's important to select your reviewers carefully, get everybody on the same page with some common ground rules, and to make informed decisions about the feedback that you receive. Lastly, you need to decide who within your organization is going to get the final say. If you've got multiple reviewers in each country, and the engineer tells you one thing, vice president of sales tells you something else, the marketing person has a different opinion, how are you going to resolve those conflicts? In some parts of the world, everybody is convinced that they're a language expert. This is very helpful to have a game plan laid out in advance. When all is said and done, you're going to want to have confidence in the translations that you're utilizing. Again, there's usually no clear right or wrong when it comes to language, but you get a lot of conflicting information. If you've given care into thoughtfully selecting your vendor and equal care into choosing your in-country reviewers, it's going to make your project go a lot smoother. and it's going to help you complete your project on time. Okay, I'm going to open up our discussion now to questions and answers. Again, there's a chat pane. If you just click on your mouse and scroll to the bottom of the screen, if you want to type in any questions there, we'll try and get to as many as we can in the remaining few minutes that we have here. Okay, the first question deals with the timeline. How much time should I allow for the in-country review? Well, this depends on the length of your file, but rule of thumb is to allow as little time as possible. The reason is you want to get back to your translation provider with feedback while they're still engaged. When we deliver a project to a client, they come back to us within a few days with questions or feedback. That's a customer service issue for us. We want to make sure that they understand what they're hearing and that it gets resolved to their satisfaction as quickly as possible. If they come back to us 3 months from now, the translators have already moved on. You're probably already using that document. Maybe you've already printed it and it's already been distributed in your field. That's not really a great time to try and come back. You may also incur costs at that point for formatting if the whole document needs to be redone. The sooner you come back to your translation services provider with feedback, the easier and more cost-effective it's going to be. Okay, here's a question that relates to whether or not a professional agency will review translations that are provided within your organization. So basically, this is the inverse of what we've been talking about, taking your in-house translations and floating them by a professional services agency for review. The shorter answer is yes, of course, we'll be happy to do this for you. We'll require your English source document as well as your translation, and we'll sit down, we'll review them side by side to make sure that the translation is an accurate reflection of your original English message. But there's a lot of caveats related to this type of a review, since we don't know the source of the translations that you've provided us. So if they've been provided by non-professionals, non-native speakers, if they're machine translations, or they're just done by somebody who didn't understand the subject matter, or perhaps didn't understand the source language, very often these translations are such a mess that we're going to recommend retranslation rather than trying to fix them. It's easy to correct in a word here and there, some grammar, punctuation, insert something that's been omitted. It's not so easy to make a correction if the sentence structure needs to be completely redone. Are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody again for taking the time to join us today. We'll be sending out a copy of this presentation so that you've got my contact information and you can feel free to share it with anyone in your organization that you would like. It will also be posted on our website within the next few days.